A bit lazy this morning, but welcome everybody to Dean House. And it's a balmy Dean House, it seems, this morning. I know that everybody who was in here yesterday, a number of people have contacted me, they waxed lyrical about the wonderful state of the lighting and the heating arrangements yesterday. But obviously, those grounding's been sorted out. There's been an awful lot of remedial work taking place since yesterday to improve matters and make people feel more comfortable. So anyway, can I make a start, please? My name is Ross Henley. I'm Chairman of the Constitution and Governance Committee. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting, and it could well be extraordinary, of the Constitution and Governance Committee meeting on the 14th of January at 10 a.m. at Dean House in Taunton. That's for the benefit of people who are joining us online, because I hope we all know where we are. And I'd like to welcome you all. Today's meeting will be run by the webcasting system via the wonderful Microsoft Teams. Committee members and key officers are physically present in the council chamber in the Dean House in Taunton. And as you know, other elected members and associated members of the public and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting or speak on specific agenda items or even observe the meeting for all of the meeting or even part of it. This meeting is being webcast, and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. The agenda pack is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which was sent out to members previously. When you're invited to speak, please could you speak clearly into the microphone, and it's really helpful. We all know who the members are, I hope we do, but it's important to don't forget there may well be people logging on or observing this meeting who don't know any of us whatsoever. So it's important you state the benefits for anybody, who you are and where you're from, and who's listening to the meeting, so they can identify us and who is speaking. And the meeting has also been audio recorded as well. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all members present to find the appropriate information. So, moving swiftly on, item number 1 is apologies for absence. I have 2 apologies for absence notified previously for the meeting, as Councillor Helen Kay has been substituted by Councillor Dave Mansell. Just looking around the room. Oh, hi, Dave. Yeah, nice to see you. It's absolutely fine. It's fine. It's good to hear you, Dave. Yeah. I love the way you sort of amended the side. Dave's very practical. Has found a solution that works. And Councillor Emily Pearlstone, who notified us last week she wasn't able to attend. And we have Councillor Mike Rigby, who's joining us for Constitution and Governance for today's meeting. Also been noticed, Councillor Sue Osborne is on the committee, but I think Sue's joining us online today.
Yes, I am, Chairman. I've been hit by one of these pretty nasty, awful bugs, so I'd rather not pass it on to anybody else if I can get away with it.
That's very kind of you to not come in and pass it on then. Thank you, Sue. We're sending our best wishes and hope you get better soon.
Yeah,
some really
so do I.
Things
it's a
going
pain.
around at the moment. Declarations of interest. Members, we advise to declare any interest regarding any matters on the agenda and to specify the nature of that interest. The chair will, I'll highlight to the meeting the standard declarations of panel members in relation to their membership of various town and parish councils, which is published on the website. And moving then swiftly on to public question time. And we've had 3 submissions for statements, questions received. I did have some complaints, is too strong a word, some sort of challenge, because there was quite a short pace of time between the agenda going out and then members of the public having time to get their representations in. It's only a matter of a few hours. So I have used chair's discretion to allow 2 or 3 members of the public to speak. And then just as another member of the public has asked me today, and I'm going to allow him to speak as well. I don't want, people to feel that they've come to meeting with an interest and they want to say something and then, for me to sort of rule them out and move a guillotine. I don't want to do that. And I think it's manageable. We've only got 4 people who want to speak, members of the public, so I think that's easily manageable. And the first one we have is Joy. Is Joy Norris with us today? Hi, Joy. Nice to see you.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, also, Joy, do you want to start again? I'm going to give you a chance to start again because I've been not very tardy and I didn't actually say you have up to 3 minutes to speak. Is that okay? So you can start again, or you can carry on from where you are. We'll still give you 3 minutes.
Acknowledge the work of the Electoral Review Working Group and recognise that their task is not an easy one due to the size and the diverse nature of this wonderful county of Somerset. The area covered by North Petherton Town Council stretches from the eastern foothills of the Quantocks to the Somerset levels and includes isolated rural styled as villages. All of this comes together cohesively as North Petherton, with local services such as primary schools, doctors and the library, and not forgetting, of course, the town council, so all serving the whole community. As at 1st of August 2024, the town has an electorate of 8,134, and this is set to grow due to further residential development of at least 500 dwellings. The area is currently a multi-member ward for Somerset Council, as it was for Somerset County Council, with 2 serving councillors. Whilst this can present challenges, it has worked with the incumbents of different political parties working together for the area they represent. Following a resolution made at a full council meeting, the Town Council has made a submission to the Boundary Commission that it believes the minimum representation on Somerset Council for North Petherton should be 2 councillors and that the current electoral boundary should be retained. Whilst the Town Council would favour increasing the representation to 3 councillors, taking into account the increasing population and electorate, it believes that such an increase should be based on the existing boundaries and multi-member model, rather than the creation of new wards, which may include communities with no commonality of interest other than an artificial electoral boundary. The Town Council's resolution was made after an extensive debate, which included the fact that the LGBTE target is for a councillor to represent approximately 4,900 people. Believes that North Petherton needs at least 2 councillors on Somerset Council to maintain representation for a growing number of residents. That representation of rural areas can be lost if the criteria for wards is purely based on population figures. There needs to be some account for distance and an understanding of the challenges of rural living. We understand that multi-member wards can present challenges, but they can also provide choice and a wider democratic approach. As we understand it, the Boundary Commission review wants to receive the views of local people and that in the future, wards should reflect local communities and identities. This has been our only opportunity to feed into the Somerset Council response, and whilst we cannot speak for other areas, we urge this committee to take into account the views of our Town Council with regard to the future democratic representation for North Petherton. Thank you.
Very much. So thank you for attending the meeting today and for presenting the conclusions of your town council. I do apologise to the Constitution and Governance Committee. You obviously be advised that the proposals to be considered by the committee for the area covered by North Petherton Town Council include those parts identified in your statement. These proposals, if approved for submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, would result in a proposal for 3 elected members to represent the town of North Petherton and its environs on Somerset Council. Want to note that Somerset Council stated preference when we embarked upon this wonderful project was for predominantly single-member divisions, and this has been applied overwhelmingly across the county. I know that we're going to have some debate about that as we go forward this morning, undoubtedly, including for those divisions incorporating North Petherton. But be assured that the Boundary Commission is welcome the views of all local people in Somerset and that each submission to the Boundary Review will hold equal weight in the Commission's deliberations. All submissions to the Boundary Commission for England are equal, and they are looking forward to submissions from maybe this council, from town councils, parish councils, political parties, interested parties, members of the public, councils, partners, and various different providers. So there's equal opportunity before the upcoming deadline to submit any proposals that you have before then. Thank you. The next statement is Councillor Alan Bradford. who is one of the 2 members on Somerset Council for North Petherton Division.
Morning, everyone. I know most of you, just a couple of you I don't know. Stephen, the first time I met Stephen. Morning to you. Right. Good morning. I'm Councillor Alan Bradford, Ward Councillor for North Petherton, the last chairman of Sedgemoor District Council and the longest serving member of North Petherton Town Council, where I was mayor for 8 years. I understand the tremendous task that has been undertaken and commend the work that has been done. However, I would say if it is not broken, leave it alone. Proposal 1. Suggestion. Moreland and North Newton and Ling are situated on the opposite side of the River Parrett. We would have to fly over Borough Bridge to rejoin the King Alfred Division. Borough Bridge has more historical links with Middlezoy and Othery than Moreland, North Newton or Ling. Proposal 2. Suggestion. North Petherton being linked with Downware and part of Bridgewater without. Once again, the River Parrett flows in between. You either have to drive through Bridgewater town or drive the A361 372 by passing through the majority of the proposed King Alfred Division. Proposal 3. Stockmore and Wilstock. Suggestion. Stockmore and Wilstock being linked with Durley. There is no vehicular transport links between the 2 areas without entering Bridgewater or North Petherton. As some of you may know, that Wilstock has a bus gate which is blocked off permanently into Road Lane, and to get around it Durley, they'd have to go out through Bridgewater or back around into North Petherton. I really cannot support these proposals. I do not think local knowledge or how the communities connect have been understood. North Petherton has been an LCN in its own right for 20 years. Lessons can be learned here, i.e. library. North Petherton Town Council includes the following areas: Wilstock, Stockmore, Somerset Bridge, Hampworth, Fordgate, Moreland, Road, Wormersdown, North Newton, Hedging, West Newton, Moon Lane, Farrington and Shearston, and not forgetting North Petherton itself. These areas are all very diverse, rural and urban. What a great shame if we would lose all these community connections built over the years for the sake of finance and penny pinching. Chairman, it is my understanding that Councillor Evans has also wrote to you about his disagreement with these proposals. Both Councillor Evans and myself agree on this. Surely Councillor Evans, as leader of Somerset County Council, must be listened to. As a multi-member ward, we work well together and put political opinions aside to make North Petherton a success. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you for coming and thank you for your representation. And I can assure you that I've had a number of discussions with Councillor Evans on this very same subject, and he's given me some good advice as well on this. So thank you for attending today, and you're presenting your suggestions about North Petherton to the committee. And it was interesting, actually. So I felt that I learned a little bit about I know North Petherton, obviously, but the area, the wider community that you represent as well. Okay. Please be assured that the electoral review working group, and I wanted to say thank you for the members of the working group who, in a very short space of time, was supporting the officers and Stephen and his team, Stephen Lake, who put an enormous amount of effort and to draw together proposals. Whether some of these will find support, some may not, but nonetheless, this was an enormous piece of work in very challenging circumstances, which officers, supported by the working group, held 5 or 6 meetings in a very short period of time in December, finishing in early January, to try and pull something together. Very, very challenging. And I think it was a lot of it was to deal with the obstacles in terms of doing it with hands tied behind the back. It was very, very difficult. And I think anything which has been brought together, you know, would find challenge from some people. I really think it's very, very difficult, and I'm not sure how if anybody could bring forward a proposal which was supported universally, but we'll see what members think today. So they've been endeavouring to pull together a scheme for Somerset that adheres as closely as possible to the principles outlined by the Boundary Commission. Must also be emphasised that the working group was a cross-party effort and we worked together very well, and I don't think there was any rancour, and I don't think any of the members acted politically. People were supportive of each other and listened to each other. They tried to produce the best scheme for Somerset whole. We tried. It's intended the proposal put forward for approval will not lead to the loss of community connections, but rather have the opposite effect and encourage the group growth of community connections across North Petherton and its environments, with the 3 dedicated councillors representing the area. I have a number of councillors who have emailed myself or Tim regarding this, and I will draw together some of the comments that they've said after I've heard the last, well, after Scott's going to say something, but I want to hear the last, well, it's got 2 more public speakers. The next one's Humphrey Hardy. I don't have a transcript of what Humphrey wants to say, but Humphrey, welcome. Nice to see you again. You want to come forward? Give you time to get forward. You okay? Yeah, careful. Just take your time, Hump. It's no problem. Okay, well, Humphrey, you got 3 minutes, but Humphrey, do you want to turn the microphone on? Sorry, yeah, the button.
That work? Thank you. I have a number of concerns about this. First of all, I wholly agree with what was just said about North Petherton. It's perfectly good for a 2-member. The numbers are right. You can have 1 2-member ward consisting of the parish, the whole parish, and nothing but the parish. The numbers are right. You've done it for Wells. You've done it for Street. You can do it for North Petherton. But my biggest concern is what's been done with Taunton. There is absolutely no attention made to coterminosity, which the Local Government Boundary Commission for England are very fond of. If you split a parish ward, you automatically, between 2 county divisions, you automatically create an extra parish ward for the bit you split off. If you split 2 off, you have to split off 2 extra parishes. There is only need to do this hardly at all in Taunton. All the parishes, but with 1 or 2 minor exceptions, fit very neatly to make a parish ward or to make a ward for the district, and or 2 small parishes combined. You've split up Victoria, you split up Blackbrook and Holway, you split up Holcombe and Lane, you split up Lingford, you split up Wellsprings and Roebuck, you split up Manor and Tangier, you split up Wellsprings and Staple Grove, and you split up Commitro 3 ways. 3 ways. This is going to totally ruin the governance for Taunton Town Council, because if you split up, if you create all those extra parishes, they'll be totally unbalanced. And that what has been done here is totally unnecessary. I would very much urge you to throw this out, because you will ruin governance for Taunton. It's not that. A few other places as well. Why don't you split up Martock? Martock makes a perfectly good division with Ashton Long Road. A couple of others. Some of the ones that used to have been Taunton, you've got Maidenbrook tied up with a bit of Holcombe and Lane. There's no connection between them, and they're totally divided by A, the river, B, the canal, and C, the railway. There's no relation to common sense in Taunton. I'm very sorry to have to disagree with Ross and the committee, but I'm afraid I must. I urge you to vote against it. I could do a better vision than that. Many thanks.
No, that's fine. It's lovely to see you and hear you speak again. I always want to listen to you, and I know you have a great passion for such matters, and I've no problem with it whatsoever with you disagreeing with me, and thank you for your representations, and it's nice to see you. But there was one other member of the public who said vote to me just before the meeting, and they can identify themselves. And thank you. I'm quite happy to allow you to give you 3 minutes to speak. Do you want to come forward and introduce yourself, please? Thanks.
Good morning. My name's Brian Larkham, and I was on Cummitrow Parish Council for 35 years, and I was chairman of that parish council for 25 years. The years don't matter in total, but it was the input that we all gave as a parish council to that area. And my concern, and I do accept what's been said earlier about the difficulty in these kinds of exercises, but the immediacy of this thing will have a bigger cost if it's got wrong. It's been put through at a speed, but the consequences are longer if the result isn't correct. And I apologise for not being as well polished as the previous speakers, because I've only come to this in the last 2 days, and there's an absence of information publicly. I can't find a great deal on this issue other than the list of divisions and the numbers. But the logic that drove some of those decisions is absent. I can't see the logic in some of this. Now, focusing on Cummitrow, naturally I'm interested in that because I devoted all those years to it. And Cummitrow was absorbed into the expanded Taunton Town Council's new area, driven on the back of the case made on the unitary creation. And we understand that. We understand that it has its part to play in an expanded Taunton area. However, this proposal makes no sense at all to us. Because the parish has been dissolved, it's important that these wards help retain the second criteria for this exercise, which is community. The numbers you can balance in different ways. But in terms of the community, with the absence of the parish council now, it is very difficult to hold on to what was the Cummitrow parish. It has a large development growing in its numbers, which is yet to get even to the halfway mark. So the numbers it's being proposed will possibly need to be revisited anyway. So this thing is work in progress as far as Cummitrow is concerned. And the real difficulty for us is that we would have increased difficulty on the go-to. Who do you go to for matters that you're concerned about when the definition is so poorly defined? Now, it can be resolved quite easily. And I would ask if this committee or the working group could look again. It can be resolved easily. And I do this very quickly, but it's pretty obvious. There should be no stretch of Bishop's Hole south of the A38. There should be no stretch of Cummitrow north of the A38. Cummitrow neatly sits, even in its expanded future, between the A38 and the Troll-Honiton roads. That is a natural definition of the area. And it's the thing that the area needs to hang on to have this sense of community. Without that, the proposal we currently see makes a mess of the area and has very little sense to it other than balancing numbers, which can be addressed by looking at the Wilton, Sherford and Manor ward and juggle those numbers a little better than currently has been done. So I urge you to please exercise the ability to look again and have a regard to what the second criteria means as much as the numbers, that sense of community, because at the moment we're in a bad place and it won't help if this goes forward. So please, I ask if you look again at that Cummitrow definition to its boundary. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Scott Waldridge to say a few words, to put in some context about where we are, the process of what we're being asked to do, and in terms of the time frame and some of the constraints we've been under, some of the rules which we've been guided by. And then I'm going to give you a flavour of some of the individual representations that I've had from individual members on these issues. And then I'm going to invite members to speak who are not members of the committee. And then we'll move into a broader discussion amongst committee members itself. And I'll also be... Yes, I'm Scott, and then I'll ask Stephen to speak. Scott. Oh, yes, sorry, I thought I'd said that, so I do apologise there. I thought in the broader discussion of the committee to speak after members of the council who aren't on the committee and the working group have spoken, then the committee will have an opportunity to discuss. Yeah, the public questions first, and we just want to ask members. Yeah, well, no, we're just going to, I think I just wanted to give a flavour. There's only about 3 or 4 members, and I know Habib's here as well. Give them an opportunity to speak, and then we'll have a discussion amongst the committee. Yeah. At any time. Well, we'll do, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's make it twice as easy. Allow any member to speak straight away in the debate. Is that okay? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Sorry, I do apologise. I didn't know I was trying to do something that was unusual, but I'm fine. That's good advice. Thank you, and I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. Hopefully everyone can hear online okay. What I'm about to do is again just provide some context and scene setting. Again, I think that's important certainly for all members. I know all members have had a number of briefings over the past 14 months about the Local Government Boundary Commission for England's review, and it is important to remember it is their review, not the Council's review of the divisional arrangements for Somerset. I'm not going to go through every bullet point in each of these slides. Again, I'm just picking out just key points. I think the important thing just to remember, particularly perhaps for some of the members of the public who are here today, is where we're coming from, as in where we currently are. So the council is currently, from an electoral perspective, based upon 55 electoral divisions. And as a result of a structural change order, that carried forward the arrangements which were to have 2 councillors for every one of those 55 divisions. Now, in terms of the review itself, the LGBCE look at not just the number of councillors, but also the arrangement of the wards or divisions, the names of the divisions, and the way in which they relate to existing city, town and parish boundaries. And I'm sure you will all appreciate that unlike some areas, Somerset has a rich tapestry in terms of numbers of parish, town and city councils from memory, amounting to at least 272, and that's excluding the parish meetings. And that is quite a considerable number compared to a number of other parts of England. The electoral review, many of you remember, is based on 4 phases. We've already completed phase 1 with the LGBCE, and you'll remember there was a submission that the council made at the end of September on the total number of councillors proposed as part of the review. We're now in phase 2. Phase 2 is done in 2 parts, so it's important to remember what we're talking about today is the first part of phase 2. There is a second part of phase 2 still to be completed. Key parts of the electoral review from the LGBC, again, they're based on some key criteria. And again, I'm not going to go through each one, but essentially they're based on electoral equality. Simply that's trying to look at what arrangements you come up with, that the total number of electors for each one of the wards or divisions is broadly the same from division to division. And you have what's called almost a tolerance factor. And generally that tolerance is plus or minus 10% as you go across. And those are the general parameters to ensure that you don't have more electors in one division, as in considerably more than what you do for other areas as well. Obviously, there's also the need towards looking at how existing communities and making sure that they are reflected in the arrangements, and also to support that convenient and effective local government arrangements. It's important to remember what it doesn't take into account, and again that's shown on that slide, not least of which around the political consequences of any boundary changes. I've already touched on some of this. The key point for me about phase 1 that's been today is we've already done an extensive piece of work with councillors, leading to a full council debate back in September, which submitted a proposal for the council from 2027 onwards to comprise 96 councillors. And again, the LGBC then subsequently confirmed that they were minded to support that proposal. So I think that's an important step there again about how the LGBTE have listened already to the council's first response and the council submission. However, the subsequent work from experience is perhaps the more challenging. So phase 2 then moves beyond the total number into how the arrangement of the wards or divisions is then done and how many councillors you have for each one of those. I think as we've already heard, the council's response also included a clear preference for a majority of single councillor areas, but recognise there may be some where we may have to have multiple councillors. I think the important bit as part of the phase 2 is just that reminder in particular, one where we've been working to a very tight timescale. You haven't got to work out quickly with a calendar to know that we submitted our council size submission at the end of September. We're required to submit our initial proposals if we want to, and this is a choice. We don't have to submit a response as a council. But if we do, in terms of the warding arrangements, then we have only until the 20th of January, which is this first part of phase 2, which is why this committee is meeting today. I think it's important to flag that if individual councillors have alternative views, perhaps for the areas they specifically represent, they are able to submit those direct to the LGBCE. They don't have to channel them through this committee. They are able to go direct. And similarly, political groups are also able to do exactly that as well. Just a quick summary in terms of the papers that are there for you clearly to debate and consider today. You'll notice that certainly since autumn, that there has been an electoral review working group that's been meeting, and that's been made up of 5 members of this committee and 5 other members working with officers, looking at the existing arrangements, looking at how we meet that 96 councillor scheme. You can see already in terms of the recommendations that the most satisfactory proposed that we could develop when you get into the detail is a scheme based on 95 councillors, albeit we've still managed to achieve, which is a significant achievement. And I do try and use a bit of analogy, which is for those that may not realise, but the task in hand in part is a bit like trying to do a jigsaw without the picture in front of you. So we've had to look at the basic building blocks, which are principally focused on where we've got bigger concentrations of population like towns, and then work around some of those knowns as we then work across the patchwork of the county as a whole. Because the existing divisions, which are 55, are not easily transferable to a requirement, which is, can we have a majority of single member divisions? And that's because the electoral numbers, which you can see in terms of this, means that we need to hit a target of each ward or division representing about 4,900 electors. And that's quite a challenge when you actually get down into the detail of how they're organised in the polling districts. So you can see the work for the recommendations, and they're set out in the papers. Again, they've been published in advance. After today, and again, subject to what the committee determine as to whether to go with the working group's recommendations and, using the committee's powers, submit a response on behalf of the council ahead of the 20th January. Or as I say, alternative, the committee could choose not, and could choose to seek to vary. What I would highlight is the challenges of trying to do a redesign on what has been several months' work to date as part of the committee meeting. I don't want to go into a detail in part, but it's fair to say that the minute you try and change one of those proposed divisions, you get a domino displacement effect. Because as you take particular areas out, whilst you increase the electorate for that, you then subsequently decrease the division that you've just taken part of that area out in order to change it. So you can have a domino displacement effect, and that can be really challenging to do. I'd highlight again, we're on a very short timescale, the 20th of January. You haven't got to work that out to know that's very close. And again, the important piece is this is in two parts in terms of phase 2. So there is further opportunities for the council to respond in terms of the arrangements, and perhaps the second part, some may say, is one of the critical parts because it's the second part of this phase 2, which involves actual public consultation, working much more in terms of working with local communities on what they think about the proposals that the LGBCE are proposing. Remember, and I don't want to keep sounding like a broken record, but we are a consultee in this process. This is not our electoral review. We have the opportunity, and we've been working hard with councillors on a proposal, but ultimately that proposal is a response to a consultation. What goes out for the public consultation, the second part, will be from the LGBCE. It will not be from this council because it's their review. And I think the important bit to remember is at the end of the review, the LGBCE publish their recommendations, which then go on to Parliament to approve. So ultimately this will culminate in an elections order. And those elections orders then will follow a parliamentary cycle. So you can see throughout all of this process, the council is a consultee and able to respond.
Scott, that sort of encapsulates where we are in terms of the process and some of the challenges that we've undoubtedly faced and how difficult it has been, particularly regarding the domino effect as well. And I like the comment about trying to complete a jigsaw without having the picture in front of you. Stephen Lake, I wanted to thank Stephen Lake again for all the hard work that you've been doing in leading up this project. So I know you spent an awful lot of time outside of work time working on this project, you know, and it's an absolutely thankless task. Stephen, do you want to say anything, please?
Only a very minimum, Chairman, which is that our building blocks, which were the polling districts, we had to use those because time did not allow us to start splitting up polling districts and splitting up parishes, etc. So that is our minimum polling district, and this is not my proposals. This is the Working Party's proposals, Chairman, and I've only put together the desires of the Working Party rather than anything that I wished to say or otherwise. I don't know the area well enough, and in some ways that's been an advantage because I'm not biased one way or the other.
I just wanted to share with you a couple of representations I've from members who aren't in the room who've emailed me who are very keen for these proposals to be read out, if members can indulge me. Councillor Tom Deakin, who is the leader of Taunton Town Council, said he's copied this into Stephen. Stephen has got it, which is good. Writing to you regarding the LGBC submission for Somerset Council is due to be discussed today. This is behalf of himself and his fellow ward member Lee Baker. Firstly, we'd like to thank the working group and officers for the immense effort that has gone into putting together these draft proposals. We recognise it's an incredibly difficult task to undertake, particularly when it comes to finding a solution that is agreeable to everyone. However, on review of these proposals, we are unable to support the current arrangements proposed relating to the existing Taunton North divisions. Primary concern is the proposal to place the Maidenbrook polling district in a division with Holcombe. This could create a division which has no shared sense of community cohesion, no shared community facilities, and a geography that places the river, which is a natural boundary, and a large trading estate, a man-made boundary between the two communities. It therefore feels more appropriate to extend the existing Taunton North division eastwards, rightfully reflecting the boundaries of Taunton Town Council, which we are in agreement with the working group. It's also essential that future population growth is taken into account, particularly to the north of Maidenbrook and Purland polling districts. Therefore, having considered these factors, we'd like to make the following proposal. That Taunton, Oldbridge and Lingford Taunton, Purland and Maidenbrook, and Taunton, Wellsprings and Robarton. We would appreciate if these proposals could be taken into consideration, but we cannot support the proposals currently put forward by Somerset Council. I've had a further one from Councillor Mike Best, who is the chair of Somerset Council. I'll try and find that one. Have a look, where's Mike's? Mike Best says, as one of the two members for the Crewkerne division, and he would strongly recommend that the town remains as a two-member division to include all the add-on current and new villages, which he says works well at the moment, as the size of the town is not large, and to try and represent one part would always involve the other. Also, the coverage of the other parishes works well, sharing the load. The numbers per councillor would remain the same shared, but this is to make the day-to-day running much easier. The only other option would be to make the town one councillor and the surrounding parish areas another, but that would not work numbers-wise. I've also had a representation from Councillor Bill Revens, which is very similar to Councillor Alan Bradford's. I have had another one from Councillor Peter Sieb. It's incredibly long. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that, because we had a representation from Peter at one of the meetings, which was really, really helpful. But I don't intend to read the whole of that. And he has copied it, helpfully, to the LGBC. But is Peter online? No, okay. But basically what Peter is saying is, from his local knowledge, he's very, very concerned about the proposal specifically for Brimpton electoral area. And, you know, again, making some of the comments regarding no natural cohesion, no strong social community identities, a way that the proposals don't, he feels, fit community cohesion in terms of natural boundaries. Okay. So I'm going to plan to open up to members, and any member. I think, you know, on Dave Mansell's suggestion, we take this where any member can contribute. That could be members of the committee, members in the room, or members of the working party. Who would like to start? Going to go with Dave. Do you want to go first, and then Dawn?
Thank you, Ross. I've been listening carefully to what people said, and do have a few thoughts, and certainly it's very evident people have worked hard on this, and what is a difficult task. So thank you for everyone who has contributed, and I'm sure we all recognise the careful work that's been put in. I think we also have to acknowledge, and some of the comments reflect this, that we know the areas where we live and where we represent, and we know them well. If we're honest, you know, the rest is a little bit hazy. We sometimes have bits of knowledge elsewhere. Now, I do feel that this has gone wrong. And the big thing that I'm picking out from one of the criteria that should follow, I suspect numbers, I'm clearly right. You know, we've had a good spreadsheet working on this. Effective government, I suspect, is okay. Where I do feel this has gone wrong is finding areas that represent community, interests and identity. And all the comments we're hearing are saying that's not happened. And at least in some areas it may be perfectly good, but clearly we're hearing a lot of areas where it's not. It does sound as though this has been too rushed. There hasn't been enough time to do the job properly. I mean, with hindsight, we might be able to make some comments on things that might have been done better. I will say, from my perspective, as someone not directly on the working group, I put some comments in from my area. I know Councillor Wren did as well. We probably should have compared notes a little bit more before we did so. We've compared notes more since. But what I will say is that what has resulted does not reflect the comments that we've put in. We've come up with something that's well away from what we've put in. Noting that, I think what would have been helpful is if there had been the time to come back to members to ask for their comments on what you've come up with, particularly in areas where you've departed from what members put in originally. Now, I will comment, therefore, on the Upper Tone area, just to illustrate concerns in our area. And in terms of bigger populations, which you've mentioned as building around, and there is an inevitability about that. You need to take care all the small rural parishes that are properly represented and looked after, and it's too easy to overlook the smaller rural areas and just lump them together in ways that may not be best. But with the proposals, Witherscombe is the biggest population in one. A good deal of it is okay. Where it goes wrong is it links up to Ashpriors and Coombe which are just distant away. There's not a connection. Those people won't thank being lumped in with the rest. At the further end of it, Ashbrittle and Storley will go, well, where is Ashbrittle? Where is Ashpriors and Coombe? They're just no connection at all. Getting between the two would be quite an interesting journey. And then Milverton, which is one of the other centres, now that looks even more odd. And that's been connected up with the edge of Taunton and Trull. No connection, absolutely none. This doesn't work. It's not sensible. It's so evident that this has been put together by someone who doesn't know the areas or understands how the communities work there. Seeing this, I have to say, I don't think Will or I were too concerned about this. We thought something sensible would emerge from what was done, and I think we're both a bit surprised at how concerned we have been by what has emerged. To try and help, we have now compared notes and put forward suggestions. We only just circulated to Stephen yesterday, suggesting how things could be made better. And this is an illustration, though, of how rushed this has all been. We only saw the proposals within the last week. They didn't come out when the papers were first published. I quite immediately asked for a map. Can we have a look at a map to see what's prepared? That came out yesterday. This is too rushed. This is not working right. We're hearing all the other problems we've heard today. I won't list the areas, but I hear what they say, and I think I can see, having a quick look, the points they're making. There does look to be a problem. I've noted, and we've not got it here, and I don't know how many people have seen it, someone at Kingston St Mary did an amazing amount of work to try and come up with their own proposals. And they had what I would say is actually a good idea. They tried to link them to the LCN areas, which in the LCN areas was strongly based on community. And I have to say, I can't judge it all, but they did a good job on the bits I can judge. So I just observe that. I'm afraid for me, and what I'm hearing so far, and I will keep listening and hearing what other people say, at the moment, these proposals are unsupportable. They should not be put forward from this council. It would be better not to put anything forward, just possibly, but we've not had enough time to look at it. We should adopt what Kingston St Mary did and say, well, if you want something, put that forward, because they look an awful lot better. But at the moment we've got these proposals. As I say, I'm sorry, they're not supportable in the current form. It would be a big mistake. It would be far better not to submit at all and just let everybody who knows their areas submit their comments without the council creating a problem by putting a set of proposals in which look unworkable. Thank you.
Chair, point of order, please. Councillor Redmond. Chair, thank you. Forgive me, I'm beginning to get a little bit confused as to where we are with this. The recommendations that you were talking to at the moment are quite clear. It says that the report and the recommendations of the Electoral Review Working Group, see Appendix A, be considered and finalised by submission to the Council's Phase 2 response to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. That is the recommendation that this committee is being asked to consider. That's in effect, because of the fact that the working group were asked to put a proposal forward. That is what is the only decision, as far as I can see, that we're being made. The problem is going to have, Chair, and forgive me for being a little bit. The working group made very clear from the very beginning that this is not going to be perfect. The problem we're going to have now, and forgive me, I think if we want to stay here for the rest of the day debating issues and minor points, we will continue to do that. But the decision that this committee is being asked to make is very clear, not individual elements, not parts of it. The committee are being asked to consider the proposal as a whole to accept or not. And I suggest that we can try and concentrate that particular point. Otherwise, we're going to spend the next 3 or 4 hours talking about my potholes bigger than yours. It's more important. And I don't think that's a good use of this committee's time, officer time, or anyone else in this council.
To be fair, I think Dave, Councillor Mansell, made very interesting and actually forthright and appropriate comments as the way he felt it. And I think it was quite clear. And I go back to what you were saying. I partly support what you said, Lee, there. We're recommended to consider and finalise the report and recommendations of the electoral review working group for submission as the council's phase 2 response to the local government boundary commission for England. And I think you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was the job of the committee to support that or not. And Dave Mansell has made it quite clear he's or not. So I think it was well within the terms of the acceptability. And I also accept that whatever we come up with is going to be very, very difficult. But let's face it, a lot of what we have at the moment is not very acceptable at the moment. Some of the boundaries which we operate at the moment are odd. You know, and undoubtedly when we submit something or don't submit something, the Boundary Commission will come up with something which we will think is odd in some places, and some places will have things that are implemented which don't look which are challenging as well. So it's not an exact science, but I think it was quite clear where Dave was coming from. He's definitely for or not.
Jeff, forgive me, just point of clarification. You may have misunderstood what I was saying. I wasn't criticising any of the previous speakers. I was specifically talking about the best use of this committee's time and the way forward. So at no point was I criticising any of the previous speakers or the future speakers. It's just that we need to concentrate, I suggest, on the recommendation rather than...
Dave did. He just made some examples based upon his and Councillor Will Wren, his fellow ward member, regarding their engagement and challenges and comments and concerns around the process and the time spent and different challenges there. And he made it quite clear, used that to frame that argument for why he was or not. And I think members would feel extremely frustrated if we were to try and curtail this and not give members the full opportunity for something which a lot of them feel very, very passionately about. And I think, you know, if any member starts to stray from the matter in hand, I think I will say. But I think it's perfectly acceptable for people to give examples regarding their own area and their own engagement with the process to frame their own arguments and their view on this subject. Councillor Johnson.
You're on mute. We can't hear you. Sorry, Dawn.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. I second what Ros has said. I think if, as a committee member, if I'm to decide which way I go with this, I feel that I should be given the opportunity to explain why I hold that view. And I don't think that's not unusual in any committee situation. So I will continue with expressing my opinion on whether I support or not this proposal. So I will say straight away, I cannot support this proposal from the working group. I represent Comitro and Trull, and you've heard from a couple of speakers about Comitro particularly. I and Habib received the maps which all councillors did to mark on those maps what you thought was your best recommendation, being the people that best knew our divisions and had represented our divisions and knew our communities best. And we expressed an aligned view, because we did talk beforehand, and those proposals were submitted to the working group. Again, those proposals like Dave, have not been upheld, and I don't quite understand why that shouldn't have been, because the numbers were a very neat split of the existing ward. The communities were very distinct within those and represented what people felt was committees in those areas. So I'm really confused how the solution, which splits Combietrow in three and aligns Trull with villages which are more aligned to Wellington than Taunton, came about. My particular concern is that we have a large development in Combietrow called the Orchard Grove development, which is a Taunton urban development. It's aligned to Taunton. It's part of Combietrow, which is an existing division within Taunton Town Council. Everything about it relates to Taunton. That development has now been placed in the area called Upper Tone, aligned with Milverton, Langford, Budville, villages much closer to Wellington than Taunton, and I just cannot understand why that would make sense. I have written to Stephen and have expressed and queried why what Habib and I had suggested has not been upheld, but I cannot support this proposal. It makes no sense for the community of Combietrow and Trull.
Storm. Tim Curley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address a couple of issues here. I wanted to go back to the jigsaw analogy. I think that it's a case that this task was set to us not only without a picture, but without any corner pieces. So it's been a really, really difficult job. And I think the thing that's restricted us and almost made this an impossible task is the direction that we had at the beginning to be predominantly single-member wards, but an inability to change the polling districts. That just means that the fit of this is always going to be nigh on impossible. We have a couple of other issues that have been addressed. There were some time factors, and certainly considering the amount of time we were given to consult on going to 96 councillors compared to how long we were given to actually draw the boundaries, which is a much bigger bit of work. That was the wrong way around. We also, and a lot of people have touched on this, we do have a lot of wrong data, and that was acknowledged by the committee at the beginning. And I think, I don't know if Stephen would like to come in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe with a lot of the developments that are going forward, they haven't been snapshotted by the electoral committee, which means that we can't factor those in. And I do believe in earlier discussions, it was stated that probably for the next election cycle, that we would have to go back and revisit these polling districts anyway. So we have a bit of a fit at the moment that we are just trying to almost fit the pieces together for one election cycle, knowing fully well that it would have to be resolved again. Now, I've heard some brilliant suggestions from people, but they are all very, very local. And I would suggest that every single person in this room can do a better job on this particular recommendation in their own local area, without a shadow of a doubt. Where that project then falls apart is when you try and fit all those wishes together. And that is, I think, where we have fallen down, because we can't break the units down into polling districts. So I hear a lot of what has been said, and I've heard a lot of people come in. We've had, 4 public speakers, we've had some councillors also. And I'm not saying it's a Taunton-centric opinion, it just happens to be that a lot of the opinions that have been stated today are around one particular area. Now, in my particular area, I also have anomalies. And I sort of accepted at the time that because of the job that we had to do here, that it was never going to be a good solution. So I have some really odd anomalies in my area that I've heard nobody else mention. So I think that in trying to fit this together for your own local areas, you're actually just compounding the problems of others in an awful lot of cases. Not entirely, and actually some would be resolvable, but with the time factors that we've had, it has been pretty much impossible to get anything better than this with the pieces that we've had. When it comes to supporting this or not, I hear what everybody is saying, and it's not a perfect solution. It never was going to be. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context from my perspective. And I'm willing to listen to the rest of the committee, and I haven't yet decided how I'm feeling about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Scott, for explaining the process. As a sort of consultees, the working group recommendation obviously carries some weight. Am I right? So the decision that this committee is going to make one way or another actually is important. Now, firstly, I acknowledge and appreciate the effort of the working group. However, I just need to know why, as councillors for their input and suggestions and totally ignore it. Because as my colleague Councillor Johnson mentioned, basically our ward is been split into 3 areas and it's not sustainable. Namely, divisions, the 3 divisions, namely 75, 76, 87, pages 107, 108 and 120. Furthermore, I think the growth of Orchard Grove development was not properly factored in. Now, I understand that, this is the electoral commissioning problem and the fact the numbers weren't factored in, but we have some sort of ideas of the numbers that are going to be built in the next 5 to 10 years. So part of that should have been actually factored in. So I urge the committee to reject the recommendation before you as is, and perhaps let us come up with our own solutions and propose that to the next, if it's likely to be another committee, to propose that to the next committee, or however we want to sort of go forward. But as it is, I cannot support this. Thank you.
I think as well, and thank you, Abib, for that. But I think it's also, just to put a rider as well, I think people in their own local areas know their own local areas best. And I've seen some really eloquent examples of how the current proposals, if submitted, would not be, why they can't support those proposals. I get that. But obviously, not always. If people put forward proposals, doesn't mean just somebody puts forward local proposals, they know that they're the local area. It doesn't mean that they are the best proposals as well. I had a proposal which was forwarded to me and copied to Stephen from a very senior member of the council, which I asked Stephen to comment upon, and he went back and said that the proposal put forward by that member wasn't fitting the criteria of the LGBCE. So it doesn't mean just because a local member has put forward something that it is acceptable and the best way forward. But I hear what people are saying. If you want to come back.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think boundaries for any areas, not just my own division, should follow a natural definition. And this exercise hasn't done so. It should actually follow main roads, streams, hedges, and it's pretty simple to sort of put those numbers together. And I think we've missed an opportunity here. I genuinely do so. I understand, it was a monumental task, but you only had to sort of ask the 110 councillors to come up and then start that, negotiations with the local councillors. And that, that happened, but none of our sort of recommendations weren't actually taken into account.
And I'd like to say as well, and I hear what Habib's saying, and I completely understand. And if members were to decide that they didn't wish to support these proposals and didn't want to make a submission, I would 100% go along with that, and I'd accept that. But I don't want people to think it's a simple process or an easy process, or that people haven't been listened to, because every representation was taken in, I believe officers have seen and have considered. But I think the time scale that the working group had and officers had was very tight. And also, I really do think, I wonder whether any proposal brought forward from this council, what sort of broad support it would have had across the council, because as the domino effect, if you sort out one part of the county, then it causes issues with the next part of the county as well. And I have to say, for the chair, I will say this, and I think that the time scale that we had was challenging, and I think that we created obstacles for ourselves in hindsight, which caused us even more problems. I think, and I will say this, and I perfectly understand if members wish to disagree with me, I think that the council's obsession is too strong a word. The council's decision to demand the vast majority of divisions to be single-member divisions, I think, was a mistake in hindsight. And I think that made it almost an impossible job for officers in the working group. And the fact that we made it difficult for ourselves, or it was difficult to split polling districts, also made the task nigh on impossible. Just see who the next speaker is. Sue Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, I think we're all under the impression that this was never ever going to be an easy exercise. It never is. what can I say? When it came down to my own division, my division got split in effect 4 ways, and some of those splits are actually probably don't meet the Boundary Commission's own criteria. For example, Ash Hill Parish was put in with Ilton and South Petherton in Division 58. There's just one problem. Ash Hill is the other side of the A358, which is the busiest road in the country, so tends to go Ilminsterwards rather than go straight across. It has got very little commonality there. The Ilminster parishes, contiguous parishes, you've made sort of Ilminster town, even though there's 2 separate polling districts there of roughly similar size, have been kept together. Unfortunately, all the villages have been hived off into Division 43, Chard East, and Division 42, Chard North. Well, Ilminster has got very little, if anything, in common with Chard. And to sort of wrench us away from our hinterland, the villages are served by Ilminster. That is where their doctors' surgeries are, their services are. That is where they look to socially. They don't necessarily look to an urban division, where the urban have Chard Avis Hayes in one case, but I will be making my own submission to the Boundary Commission, because one of the things we were told in an earlier meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, is that all submissions would have equal weight. So a submission from a small parish council would be the same as that from maybe a large town council, or even Somerset Council itself, that those all go forward. I've given all the information I can to the parishes so they know what is proposed, and urge them themselves to write to the Boundary Commission in their own right. So they've had the maps, they've had the papers for this meeting, so they should be very clear as to what is proposed, and ultimately it is down, I think, to the parishes as well to have a say in where they feel they fit, rather than sort of something imposed top down. As it stands for my division, from a totally parochial point of view, I don't think I could support this. And listening to others in the room, I think it's going to be very difficult. Despite all the work to do this, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for us to support it, because as we're seeing, there are so many flaws and problems with it. And the risk is that the Boundary Commission may say, well, that's Somerset's submission, that's absolutely fine, we'll go with that. And perhaps unconsciously, they may not give adequate weight to submissions made by other parties, such as town and parish councils, or even individual members of the public.
Much too. Well, I just, for personal points of clarification, wanted to apologise for having to stand up and have a walk around. I have a leg injury at the moment. I spent several hours in Chard Hospital on Sunday, had my trousers cut off me and being bandaged up from the ankle up to the knee, so which was rather undignified. But so it's not an act of disrespect. I just every half hour so I need to stand up and go and have a leg stretch.
Yeah, it's fine. I was sort of trying to concentrate on what I was saying, because it's not an easy topic, and I am not a numbers geek, and when it comes to crunching numbers and all the rest of it, I'm not your guy, so to speak. So I find this exercise quite hard in that respect, and if you've got to come up with more or less an alternative Somerset proposal just because you're raising concerns about your own ward, again, it almost feels like a deterrent, as though we're being deterred from putting issues forward. It does feel sometimes like it's very deterring if we're being told, oh, well, you can't do this because of that or something else, when actually it is important we get it right. And I certainly know that some of the numbers are wrong, because future developments, or even developments with outline permission, the numbers generated haven't been taken into account. So I will be making my own submission, and sorry I haven't perhaps engaged with your process.
No, that's good, and that's what we want members to encourage members to do. It's quite clear there's a broad level of not supporting this report within the council. So That's fine, absolutely fine. Happy to support that. That's the way the committee is going. But obviously members have that opportunity, and I think they'd be selling ourselves short if they didn't use an opportunity to get their submission in by the 20th of the January to the LGBC.
Yeah.
Moving swiftly on, Gwyl Wren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't extend the debate except to say that I fully endorse the comments made by Councillor Mansell, Farber, High and Johnson. I think the arrangements around to the west of Taunton are very, very poor. Wellington is split into three, as far as I can tell. The map I don't find terribly easy to decipher, but I think, following on from what Councillor Osborne has just said, I think a council submission, a formal Somerset Council submission of this nature, I think would only muddy a very muddy pond already further. And so therefore and since it doesn't seem to be gathering an awful lot of support, I think my view would be it would need to be left to councillors and parishes to make their own submissions. Thank you.
You're so succinct, Gwyl. Helen
I do
Kay.
my best.
No, Richard Wilkins and Helen Kay.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't going to speak on this at all, but following Councillor Mansell's endorsement of the Kingston St Mary submission, I'd just like to share with you an experience I had. I have to confess I haven't read the Kingston St Mary submission, but I spent a good hour on the phone to a member of Langport Town Council, I won't name, who was absolutely fuming at the Kingston submission due to the fact that it split Langport away from Hewish Episcopacy, which indeed they are at the moment in the process of their own commission to join the two councils together. I then had to spend another half an hour on the phone, and also a lot of other things that were pointed out to me that didn't work from the Kingston St Mary submission. And then I had to spend another half an hour explaining that it probably wasn't his best use of time to put his own submission that would split Kingston St Mary in half and put half alongside Minehead and the other half alongside Frome. So I'd just like to share that as an observation that you know, what might seem sensible in one area can be completely warped in another area. So it's been a completely difficult operation that you've come up against as a working group, and I understand that. And I understand that come the end, whatever happens to this, with this, there's not going to be that many completely happy people. But I couldn't let Councillor Mansell give the impression that the Kingston St Mary submission was wholly successful, because in my area it certainly is not. Okay, thank you.
I think that's a really good point, Richard, as well, because I'd like to just add a little bit of anecdote to myself. But yes, Dave.
I'm sorry, I wasn't going to do this, and it wasn't until the final comment that I thought I better should. Richard, thank you for your comments. You have named me, and I'm quite happy with most of what you just said, but you have overemphasised one point rather badly. So very interesting to hear about Langport. Absolutely noted that, and I think there's a lot in what you say. I absolutely did not endorse Kingston St Mary proposals, so can I just please stop that hair from running? I don't believe I did that. About I made some appreciative comments of their submission. One thing I did note about it was that they'd looked to align with LCN areas, which I thought was a good thing to do. And I think probably no more than that. But what you said, Richard, was helpful on Langport, and I've certainly noticed that. I'm sure the rest of us have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Apologies for misrepresenting you, Dave. Yeah, no, I just heard that you were in favour of the way in which they've gone about it, and perhaps I misunderstood slightly.
Lee, is it a point of order, or am I adding you to the list? Go to the list. And I'd like to say as well, and sorry, Dave, for not picking up on the point of order. It's perfectly appropriate for you to do that. It's not exact science, and there are wherever we come out of it. But just remember, when we come out of this whole process, there will be some things which we will be unhappy with. We use the example of Wellington at the moment. 3/4 of Wellington sits nicely and happily together in a single 2-member division, where a quarter of Wellington is in an electoral division with Hatch Beecham and Rewishton. Lovely places, wonderful communities, but they don't have much community cohesion and linkage with each other. And regarding the LCM boundaries, some of them are really good, but I would hope there are some LCM boundaries which urgently, at the first appropriate opportunity, looking at again, because they're not all perfect by any means. The next speaker is Helen Kay.
Yeah, thank you, Ros. An observation and a question. I've put it in the chat. I used to be an officer at Wiltshire when we went through all this, and we actually had the maps produced, and we had 2 different alternative versions, a bit like the Kingston St Mary one and what we've got in front of us. But we had them for several months, that we looked at them for several months, and we had facilitated sessions where the councillors would all come together to discuss in their areas, the equivalent of LCN areas, what they thought about the boundaries. And there was a lot of discussions about the natural features or rivers or railways and all the rest of it, which we just seem to have not had here. And that's been severely truncated by the timescales that we're working under. So that's just an observation. But as we are where we are, I'm just wondering whether Scott or Steve could tell us what happens if I understand correctly, that if your committee today refuses the recommendation made by the working group, and what the risks are, and or whether or not the committee may need to understand if it gets put forward. I understand from what a few other people have said that it carries the same weight as any other, supposedly carries the same weight as any other of the other submissions that are put in. So yeah, I'd just like to know going forward. I mean, I also, just by the way, have my own issues in Frome, where at the moment on the table there's a massive development being considered for that's going to add at least 5,000 people to the town, and but because it's not actually got planning approval yet, and it won't start to be built out for at least 3 or 4 years, it's not being considered at all. So whoever gets that division is not going to just have 5,000 people. They're going to end up having 10,000 electorate to actually represent within the next 10 to 15 years. And that's another question. I think it was Tim Curley suggested that we might have to do this all over again in another 5 to 10 years. I don't think that is the case. I think that once we've had the Boundary Commission review, we will not be entitled to have another one for another 20 years or so. So could I have that explained as well, perhaps by Scott or Steve? Thank you.
We do this as part of a double act with Steve as well to by all means chip in. I suppose for me again, just working through a series of the points, I think it's important to remember that whilst the review started in November 2023, you may recall that the first phase, phase 1, was supposed to be completed at around June of this year. But due to the snap election, phase 1 was extended. However, phase 2's deadline dates have been kept exactly as what they were, principally because you work back from finalising the recommendations and then securing parliamentary approval. So I think it's right to reflect that, certainly with electoral reviews in the past, that generally we have had in the first part of phase 2 more time than what we have had. But the reason for that is because we had a longer time in phase 1. That's the first part of the context. I think the second bit is also recognising, and I know I did this as part of the scene setting, that phase 2 split into 2 parts. So the first part, again, from the committee's perspective, I suppose it's being clear, I know Councillor Curley referred to this, that our full council in its phase 1 submission set out some pretty clear parameters for phase 2. And one of the key ones are the total number of councillors And the second one, a preference for a majority of single member divisions. When you apply that as one of your key parameters, and I would say in part that in terms of the recommendations that have been brought forward, accepting the various comments, and we will always get those as part of electoral reviews, because I've been involved in electoral reviews a number of times, and some of those localised comments, it's inevitable when you do an electoral review of this scale that you can't meet every single local perspective, and it's that balance. But the thing for me to highlight is in part, in terms of those parameters set by full council, which the working group have been using, again, that preference for single member divisions, just to put things in perspective, 96%, which is one hell of a percentage, of the proposals are single member in nature. Only 4% are multi. Equally, in terms of the LGBCE's point, which is electoral equality, you remember one of those criteria, trying to make sure that each council represents the same number of electors. The proposal that's been developed, again, from the LGBCE's perspective, would probably win a gold star, because you've only got 2% of divisions outside of the 10% tolerance, which again is one hell of an achievement in terms of trying to balance. However, and this is I think the nub of today's debate, the challenge is the second criteria, which is how the proposals represent community identity and community interests. That is purposefully why phase 2 is split into 2 parts. The second part, after the 20th of January, is when there is full consultation with local communities, and that is deliberate on the LGBT's perspective. That's to actually test, this is what the proposals that they are consulting on, with the information that they have received, both from, say, this council and other parties in phase 1 and the first part of phase 2. That's when they test those proposals with communities, and that's really when the communities can really get their teeth into the proposals. And I fully expect, if the LGBTE were to use the working group's report as a proposal, and I will emphasise the word if, because it's their proposal, they would just take into account the council's response. If they were to use that community identity, then yes, there are lots of then detailed opportunities for the sort of issues that councils have raised today to be dealt with as part of that second part, and for the LGBTE to get a very clear issue in terms of some of those localised examples. I think the challenge is, clearly as the local council here and knowing our local communities, it's about striking that balance. And I think today's debate again is highlighting that's really difficult when you're doing an electoral review of this scale within the time scales that we have. So I think all of us appreciate the challenges of trying to get that phase 1 response.
Sorry.
In a position that this committee feels able to either support or not taking on board the debate. But I think for me, it is important just to recognise that as part of phase 2 is in 2 parts. So the point about community interests and identity, that's not done and dusted at today's debate. That's actually done in detail in the second part of phase 2. But I think, like we all appreciate, hopefully we'd want it in the state that we'd like to see it to test with the community.
Can I come back quickly on that, please, Ros? Hello?
You can.
Yeah, just wanted to say, I understand. Thank you for the explanation about why that part 1 of stage 2 has been so truncated. That's useful to know, to understand. I'm just thinking, going forward, I wanted to understand what the risks were. So if the committee didn't approve what is in front of them today by the working group, does that then mean that the Boundary Commission itself then puts together a whole load of boundaries themselves, and they'll effectively do the same as what the working group did by amalgamating the polling districts, because that's what they've got to work with, and they'll work with a single member principle, and they might end up with something very similar to what we've already got. Is that the alternative outcome, and is there any chance at all, if the committee were minded to actually approve today what the working group have done, then is there any leeway at all, we've got another week before we actually have to submit this, that there could be some sort of delegation to officers to go away and see if they can tweak some edges here and there just in the last week? Or is that too much of an ask of our officers before they actually put the submission in? And they may find, they'll look at it and they'll say, no, but we can't do anything about that. In our professional view, we can't change it. But I'm just looking at the alternatives that you've got in front of you today, and what the risks of each one of those approaches might be. Thank you.
Stephen, do you want to come back?
If I can, on the first point particularly, Chair, the Boundary Commission will make up its own proposals. I have been speaking to them, and they will look for 96 single member divisions. And they will do it from what they know and from the submissions that they've had. They will come and visit the area, but their knowledge is fairly limited, let's say, compared with the members of the working group and this committee. So we will be in their hands, and we would then have their proposals to discuss.
Is there any chance of fiddling around the edges to make any small changes before that goes in next week, Steve, or is that too much?
This is a member proposal. Yes, I mean, we could look all the way through it again, but I wouldn't want to put something forward which doesn't have member approval or prior member approval.
Number of speakers still to speak. So Martin Ware.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I had some input into the working party as a substitute, so but I have been through this process before in a more minor capacity in South Somerset some years ago. We did exactly this, and we went through exactly the same discussions, frankly, and we submitted something, and the various people submitted things, and quite frankly, it came back more or less as the council suggested, but not exactly. It was altered by the commission. So, but I would be very, very worried if we today decide not to submit something. I think that would be a big mistake by the council. I think we have to give a lead of some sort to the commission. Otherwise, what Stephen has just said will take place. They will impose something on us, which won't be anywhere near what we have submitted, and probably won't be anywhere near what the people who are objecting to are asking for. So I would be very, very careful about not submitting anything. And the other thing I was thinking, listen to all the discussions, and I feel for them because, as I say, I went through it before in South Somerset, and but what this is going to be is the power of the representative by the council, this Somerset Council representative. He will be the one who will have to cross the roads. He will be the one who will wade across the river in North Petherton or whatever. But I mean, and it happens already. My ward in Chard is Chard North. It is part of the town, and it is about 5 parishes and meetings. And it's split very right down the middle, more or less, by the 303. And some of the parishes I represent are now on the other side of the nearer Taunton, frankly. But I hope, and I would like to think, that they don't feel not represented. They don't feel their community's been split. They are, I go, and Jenny, my fellow councillor, go to the parish meetings and the parish councils and the town council, and we then take the views of those various parishes and those various communities and do what we can about it. That's what I do as a councillor, and that's what when these new areas are produced, that's what the elected councillor in 27 will do. And I can't really understand this thought that we're going to be splitting up communities, because what we're doing is is changing the representation to this council by various communities, and they will still be funneled in to the council. They will still get their get the report to the council about their potholes, and there will still be a community among themselves. That we're not doing that. What we're doing is changing the representation, and so I just think that, as I said before, we would be very, very unwise, in my opinion, to not submit a representation to the Commission, and I will be voting to do just that. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Mike Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I strongly suspect that if you look up in the dictionary the word or the words thankless task, you will find the explanation trying to do a Boundaries Commission review that pleases 110 councillors. So I mean, this is a horrible job to have done. I don't envy those of you on the working group trying to do this. I think there's fairly widespread discontent with the outcome, but that I think whatever you've done, it would have been much the same. I won't go on at length about my own division, although I will slightly bemoan the fact that in parliamentary terms we've been bunged in with Tiverton, and now in council boundary terms we're in with the boundaries of, or the suburbs of Bridgewater, and I don't think we've got a lot in common with either of those places. In terms of what we do going forward, so I was going to ask some questions similar to Helen, so I won't repeat that, but it does rather feel, having listened to everyone speak today, that precisely no one's going to support this. And the question is what does happen then? The recommendation is that we try and consider and finalise the working group report. Well, we're not going to do that today, are we? And we don't really seem to have much time left. So it is the most likely outcome today that we don't support the working group's recommendations. You know, what happens next? Do we just not put anything in as a council and do it as individuals? How do we do that going forwards? What happens?
But then the Commission won't have any views of the council at all, other than from individual members. It will be very difficult for them to put forward a comprehensive scheme based on the little jigsaw pieces that you put together, because they won't fit together. It never does work. You've got 55 bits at the minute, and you've got to end up with 96.
Stephen Pugsley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've probably been involved with 5 or maybe 6 boundary commission reviews over the years, going right the way back to when Joy Norris was a West Somerset officer. I have to say, I have never known a situation where a council has not made a submission. Not the least because the local Government Boundary Commission for England does not have the degree of intimate local knowledge to be able to take some of the fine decisions that the councils can. The other thing is that the council can, and this is what happened in the case of the working group, provide an overview of the whole area. The working group, I have to say, I believe worked extremely well in a very non-partisan manner. There was a bit of concern, I think, from some members at the outset that it was somehow going to be party politically driven. I can categorically say that it was not, and that it was handled in an exemplary way with magnificent support from officers, and that we spent weeks going through every possible permutation and every possible grouping together, but bearing in mind that the parameters had been set by this council. The number of councillors, the predominance of single member wards, and bearing in mind the Commission's own first requirement, equality of democratic representation. So we had to produce seats where the members represented 4,867 voters or so. That task, as has been said, had to sit down with Somerset as a jigsaw puzzle and to create the pieces out of that using the existing electoral components, units. And this proposal today has done exactly that. If we do not submit it, we are entirely at the good nature of the Boundary Commission and the host of other, but I would suspect, with all due respect, relatively granular comments from parishes, groups of parishes, groups of members, maybe individual members. It will not be able to give us a whole picture. We looked in depth at a number of areas, and taking Martock as an example, which was raised earlier, I think, by one of the public speakers, what would happen if you did something different with Martock? And the ripple effect of doing something different with Martock reached all the way up to Frome. So therefore, we are left with a complete picture, which the working group has come up with, as I say, on an entirely non-partisan basis, which I believe is a fair representation of what the democratic representation of the council could be. It won't please everybody, doesn't necessarily please me, but nevertheless, it is entirely workable. There are other ways of doing it. As a complete picture, Kingston St Mary have done a very interesting piece of work. To my mind, however, it fell down immediately because they were suggesting that the Exmoor LCN should remain split into two, that produced 2 seats that had a variance of what, 40%, 35% from the local government commission's requirement. So it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work from the word go, I'm afraid. And this is the problem that the working group had. We have the set parameters. We have to try to produce a result. If we as an authority, and as I say, in my experience, I've never known an authority not make a submission, do not say something to the commission will be working to some degree in the dark. And you might think you'll be illuminating your little corner of it, but don't bank on it. So I would very much urge, actually, the voting members of this committee to support this recommendation. There are 1 or 2 things that I think we do need to consider, which are some of the names of the divisions, because that is one thing we can influence today, I think, rightly and fine tune. But nevertheless, I would still urge the committee overall to support this recommendation, because without it, I think we are at the mercy of the commission. And I think that would be retrograde.
Theo Butt-Philip.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was a member of the working group, and we did work very hard over a frustratingly short period of time to try and come up with a proposal which meets the requirements across the whole county. And I think I would add, Councillor Rigby has said that he thinks this is the definition of a thankless task. I mean, I'd add that to the list of being transport portfolio holder for a large council as well, something he has a great deal of experience of. But we've sat here for 1 hour and 40 minutes and listened to our colleagues from across the different parties and across Somerset tell us how dissatisfied they are with the work that we've come up with. And I can completely understand that. It's been an incredibly difficult task to attempt to get right. I think, convinced that we haven't quite managed that. What frustrates me is I think actually if we had another 4 or 5 weeks, we could probably resolve a lot of these problems. We haven't got another 4 or 5 weeks. We've got 6 days, which is absolutely maddening. But over the course of this morning, with the exception of Councillors Wale and Councillors Pugsley, who have spoken very, very eloquently in favour principally of the principle of putting in a submission, not so much in favour of what we've actually come up with. Pretty much everyone has said we're not happy with this. You can't possibly let it go forward. And I'm sure that other colleagues have spoken to colleagues who have not spoken publicly who said the same thing. I certainly haven't had anyone saying to me, well done, we like your proposals. I think there are some very good bits of these proposals. I think we've done a very good job for the Minehead and Exmoor area. I think we've done a very good job for the Frome area. I think there are other areas where I think we have got it right, but I think there are areas where we clearly have not got it right. So we come back to the issue of, do we need to make a proposal so that Somerset Council has, given a steer to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England? The issue with that is that as soon as we do it, we're saying, this is what Somerset Council thinks. This is what we want you to do. And it is, blindingly clear from speaking to colleagues and listening to contributions today that this is not what a huge number of members of Somerset Council want us to do, and also the communities who we've heard of. And I say to the representatives of North Petherton, I did make some of the points that they've made in the working group, and I was unsuccessful, and I apologise for that. So my suggestion is that at this stage we do not make a recommendation on behalf of Somerset Council, because we do not have a recommendation that clearly has the support across the board in Somerset Council. The proposals, if we do not do that, then yes, as individuals we can put in proposals, parish councils can put in proposals, anyone can put in, Stephen can put in a proposal if he wants to. It'd be slightly odd if he did it off his own bat. The Local Government Boundary Commission will then take all of that information and come up with, a starting point, and then there will be a second phase when, again, the same group of stakeholders, including us, can respond to that. So I think probably what the way forward looks like for Somerset Council is to not put in a proposal now, wait and see what the Boundary Commission comes up with in response to everyone else's proposals, and then we can make a decision about whether we want to respond to that at that stage. And that is the only approach which I think we can fairly say is likely to be a response which represents a broad swathe of consensus across the council, because to me it's very clear that what we have in front of us, very sadly, does not. Therefore, I would like to make the proposal that we make no submission at this stage.
We do have about 6 further speakers, and I am proposing to try and close that down, because we're getting into the stage where some people are coming back for a second and third time, and we could be at 3 o'clock this afternoon. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow all those 6 speakers, but I just want to know, we've heard a proposal from Councillor Butt-Phillip. Just to park this one, but do you have a formal seconder for that? The Mansell's hand was up first, I think, and thirded by Councillor Johnson. There, but members in agreement, we hear the other 5 or 6 members who wish to speak, and then before we put that to the vote. Councillor Barron.
Sorry, forgive me, Chair. Could you confirm who the 5 or 6 members on your list are, please?
Lee, David Fothergill, Alan Bradford, John Hunt, Martin Dimmery, Dave Mansell.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations to Stephen for doing a great big piece of work, which satisfies nobody. You've got 110 opinions out there of what you should have done, and it won't satisfy anybody in total, I suspect, but we can each only speak about our own division. Mine is Mendip Central and East, which is very much a rural division, but I am seeing rural parishes pushed into urban parish or urban settlements. And they're not happy about it. I think it would be even worse if we say, well, we're not going to make a submission to the LGB Commission. And I would say we would do them a further disservice if we just said, well, we're not going to bother. We've taken your opinions on board and we're not going to listen to what you say because we're not bothered to make a submission. So I think that's doing them a great disservice. But I do take a lot of hope that what Scott told us, that the second part, the individual, I didn't say the individual parishes, but I'm assuming the individual parishes will be consulted at that stage and will be able to have their say and make their own points as well as I've made them for them today. Thank you, Chairman.
Succinct. Lee Reb.
Thank you, Chair. I speak as a member of the working group. First of all, I want to apologise for my passion in this debate. I've spent, along with other members of the working group, a great number of hours and on a great number of different meetings in, in different places trying to find a way forward. I think it's important that I add my thanks to the officers that have worked on this project. I cannot put into words the effort that has been taken to generate this proposal. These proposals are not perfect. The working group worked hard within the parameters set for us to try and find consensus to allow a cross-party proposal to go forward. The first part of phase 2 of this consultation ends on the 20th of January. The date is not going to change. We must submit something to the Commission. At the first meeting of the working group and at every subsequent meeting, the chair went out of his way to explain the limitations placed upon us. He then completed his comments by asking the working group to try and find some consensus, as it was his hope that the working group could go to this meeting with consensus. Could go to this meeting today with cross-party agreement. That was where I thought we were at the end of the last meeting. I made the point at the first meeting of the working group that the parameters being forced onto us for this consultation are poor, to say the least. We all agreed that to do this properly, we would need more time. At that first meeting, the chair and officers confirmed that that was not an option. Being forced to use the polling districts as our smallest jigsaw piece offers up limitations in itself. Having to fit the 4,867 electors per councillor, plus or minus 10%, based on the 2030 estimates, is a massive limitation and in many cases are inaccurate. This was never going to be easy. The broad number of opinions expressed today confirms this. Council asked the working group to find a response. They worked very hard to try and find a way forward. Please don't negate their effort. I urge this committee to allow the working group proposal to go forward. Not submitting a response to this element of phase 2 cannot be an option. I suggested at the working group that we include a form of words that sets out our concerns, that could be included in our response. I reaffirm this today and ask members to make sure that the time and efforts of officers and members in the formation of this proposal in front of them today are not wasted. We must submit something. If we do not submit a response, the Commission will not have an opinion from Somerset Council, in effect working in the dark. Please step away from the local concerns. You will have the chance to do that in the second part of phase 2. The proposal from this working group is not perfect. It was never going to be perfect, but we must make a submission. We do not have the time. We've never had the time to do this justice. I asked the 13 members of this committee to allow the working group proposal to go forward, but include a comment that outlines our concerns, so that the Commission has a proposal or submission from Somerset Council, but also the Commission needs to understand where we are in the submission of that proposal. I believe you should allow this proposal to go forward and work for the next hour or so to get a form of words that expresses our joint concerns. Thank you, Chair.
For the go.
Thank you very much indeed, Ross. And can I start out by just paying tribute to you and to Tim Curl for the way that you chaired this committee, and the people that sat on the committee who came at it as Somerset councillors, not local divisional councillors, but Somerset councillors, to make a decision on behalf of Somerset and to work for the best of Somerset. And that's what worked particularly well in the working committee. We all worked together as Somerset councillors looking at the whole. And Steve Lake, bless him, worked many, many hours on many, many different aspects of what we asked him to go away and do. And he came back with the very best. And when we had a problem, he went away and he did it again. But the important thing was that we came today with a recommendation based on our understanding of what we believe would work across Somerset for our residents in total. I think I've been slightly disappointed this morning that what we've had is divisional debates. And you were always going to have divisional debates because not everybody was going to be happy. 110 people were not going to be happy. But, you know, we've only heard from about 10 or 12 or 15, which is less than 10% of total councillors. So we just have to be careful here that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So my concern is really about Somerset not having an opinion. Really? Somerset Council does not have an opinion about how it should be structured and run through its elected councillors. That is such a sad situation. If we say to the public, we just can't make our minds up, we can't agree, what are the public going to think of us? They expect some leadership. Now, our leadership will not always be right, and they'll be often wrong, and we'll get things wrong and we'll get things right. But we have to show leadership, and not to submit in this instance, I think, is an absolute indictment of a failure. So therefore, I would encourage the council members there to elect to let it go forward. It's not perfect. It was never going to be perfect. Some people will always be unhappy, and I guarantee, because I sat through when the 2013 Boundary Commission was announced, I sat through people literally pulling their hair out because it wasn't what they wanted. And if we hand this over to the local Boundary Commission review, they will come back with something, I guarantee you, it will be a lot of people that will not be happy with what's been recommended. So I think Lee Redmond has made a really, really important point, which is that we should let the original vote go forward. That's what you're there to do. You should support it. And if you so wish, that you should attach a side letter which says, these are our concerns with our scheme, and this is what we would have looked at had we had further time, and which we would like to discuss with you further. And I think that is the sensible, the mature, the grown-up and the leadership option, which is now in front of you. And I think most people in this county would be absolutely astonished if we can't make a decision as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was quite interesting to sit here and hear all the debate, actually. And I think there's far more unhappy people than there is happy people. And it's okay for the people that's, I'm all right, Jack. They can shout as loud as they like, you know, they're okay, but it's the people that are actually affected that matters. I happen to be one of them in North Petherton. I'm beginning to think it's a bit like a planning committee. If we don't agree with the decision, we're going to go to appeal. So guns to head straight away. And that's not always good. That always doesn't make people always make the right decision. My gut feeling from my area I represent, this is totally the wrong approach, the wrong way. It just doesn't stack up at all. And I don't think there's any vision or looking to the way my area runs, or the way it's been run for the last 20 years, and how successful it is. We've just had a cock up with the amalgamation, done away with all the district councils to form to Somerset Council, right? That's the 1-1 cock up. We just had a cock up with the LCNs that aren't working perhaps as good as they should be. It's taking far too long. And would this be the third thing? I just ask people. So just take a look at what you're all voting for. You know, I'm not a great political person. I can see there's a great difference of opinion here this morning, and it's interesting to sit back here and watch, and it's very, very good. But I'm speaking solely from my area and the people I represent, and what we've worked for the last 20 years in getting things right. And that could be destroyed overnight if we aren't careful. And if anybody won't talk to me afterwards, and I'll tell you why, I'm not prepared to say now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alan, am I a passion? I like plain speaking. John Hunt.
Yeah, so do I, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that. Firstly, I want to thank Stephen, Ross and Tim, brilliantly led on the working group, and to agree with those others who've said this already about the working group, that it was, I'm an independent councillor, as you will know, and from my independent view on that committee, I can confirm that it was indeed non-political, which was a surprise to me. I thought it would be, and I was completely wrong on that. I've got lots to say, but I'm not going to say it now. I've said most of it during the meetings we had. But what my question is, it is fairly obvious that this is not going to go through at this scrutiny committee, and I suspect and in the following times as well, which effectively means we are not going to, as a council, submit this application. Whether we do or don't submit a thought from the Somerset County Council, Somerset Council. What happens? So we're in stage 2 now. So this will be the first part of stage 2 if we do or don't submit. The second part, it then comes back to us with a map, I'm assuming, and the Commission's idea, either following our submission or their own, with their idea of what this should look like. It then goes to consultation, which we can then, I hope I'm getting this right, perhaps Alan can put me right on this, or Stephen can, that we can actually look at it again, whether we submit or not. And we can say, well, actually, no, I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with this. North Petherton, not happy with the situation there. We would like to see this, this and this. We can do that. I accept that, which sounds great. But can I just ask, perhaps those who've had experience, I've not had experience of a previous boundary change, but those that have, I think the question is, does it actually make a difference? So let's say I say, look, I'm not happy with North Petherton, I'd like it changed to this. What are the chances of that actually happening is what I want to know. Do these boundaries get changed in the second part of stage 2? Or actually, is that just a consultation which no one actually listens to? Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I can actually say for myself, as with David Fothergill, we've been through several of these reviews. I can absolutely guarantee you that on more than one occasion, from stage 1 to stage 2, where the LGBC has published its proposal for stage 1, I personally have challenged formally some of the suggestions in the areas where I represent after the stage 1 report. And on more than one occasion, they have been listened to and been changed by the boundary commissioners at the stage 2. So I wouldn't want anybody to think the stage 2 is just a mere rubber stamping exercise.
So just a quick comeback, if I may then, Mr. Chairman. On that basis then, if we were to submit what has already been agreed by the working group, it could be changed in stage 2 of, sorry, the second part of stage 2. Or if we don't submit, whatever they submit to us as their idea, the Commission, we would then be able to go against that as well. We could change that, and the likely chance then is it would be changed.
There's no guarantee, but anything which was proposed by the LGBC at end of stage 2, there's another formal consultation periods, even shorter than this, so the short period around about 8-10 weeks, I think, where we'll have any opportunity to challenge or put forward for further proposals based upon what they have submitted. Martin Dimery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for letting me. I was on the working group as well, and I completely support and endorse the comments that were made by Councillors Pugsley, Redmond and Fothergill. Given the parameters that we had to work with, I think we came up with a reasonable solution. What I would say is that I agree with Councillor Hunt too. It wasn't really politically motivated at all. I think if anything, it was more a matter of geography. And it may be that amongst us there were some areas of the county that weren't terribly well represented. I know from my point of view, I was able to make a reasonable some reasonable comments about the Frome area, for example. But I, like many others, know very little of some other areas of the county. So there is inevitably going to be some weaknesses in this. And I agree entirely that I think this proposal should go through, with the caveats that there are some areas that are very unhappy and may need looking at again. Certainly, there certainly doesn't seem to be much representation from most of the county. So I can only assume that those areas that haven't been represented today are relatively happy. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Martin, yeah, I do remember a comment at one of the meetings we were online, and you said, I pretty know much about Frome, and you made some really good contributions about Frome. I remember we had a discussion about where Nunny sat. He said, but I know a lot about Frome, but I'm not sure. And Dave Mansell, my group colleague, knows a lot about the other side of the county, or the border with Devon and Wivelisc and Milverton, but I'm not so sure all the bits in between. And I think that highlighted the fact, that we all bring to the table bits of information we have about our local area, but it's impossible to be an expert across the whole of Somerset. You're a very special person, if you are. Dave, if you want to come back.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Right. I've sort of been listening, and at one time I was trying to sort of think whether there might be a possibility of a sort of compromise, a way of moving forward. I particularly listened to what Stephen Martin had to say, and Lee and Martin just now. And I was trying to think whether there is some way of going forward, but also highlighting the problems. I'd say I was struggling with that, and that alone would need a bit of work to do. I have to say, Theo, you helped me because I was struggling with that in my mind, with the discussion that we had. But I think what my sort of gut is telling me is that there is too much that is wrong here for it to be a good starting point for the whole of Somerset. I think the problem is we've run out of time, and in particular the problem is the proposals did not get a further stage of feedback from the local members. It really needed that, and it's got some really rough and sharp edges that have been left here, and some of them are just so jarring when you looked at them in ways which certainly I've been quite surprised at. That if we start with that as a starting point for those areas, and we've heard of a large number today. I think it's more than just a handful and minor. It's just too many to do that, unfortunately. But to try and help, could I suggest, and I think this would happen anyway, but in effect as an amendment to what Theo said, keeping everything what was proposed by Theo in terms of not going with it, but that the committee also urges Somerset councillors to feed in to the Boundary Commission now, and of course some city, town and parish councils and anybody else local. I am perhaps particularly thinking of Somerset councillors, but of course not exclusively, that we feed in quickly now with our comments, and everybody can feed in. And really, this is the stage that the Boundaries Commission at now. They want the local opinion, and unfortunately I don't believe we've captured that well enough in the document that we've got before us now. Now, for some areas we've heard from Stephen that Exmoor sounds good. We've heard from Martin Dimery that Frome sounds good. I would suggest say that. You put forward what's come forward and say, for Exmoor and Frome, this looks like good solutions, and other areas too. But for those of us where it really doesn't work, and I'm afraid doesn't work by a long way, we must comment as well and put in what we do. And certainly Gwilla and I have discussed it, and we've not got one solution. We've actually said there's several which we would accept, and I'm very much minded to put those several forward, not just, it's got to be this, but to do that. So could I suggest that as a way for? It's unfortunate. It would have been best if we could have had a submission, but it does feel like we've run out of time, and I think it would be a failure of leadership, in fact, to go with something that is clearly got big problems with it. We shouldn't do that. It's false leadership to lead people in the wrong direction. And there's some in the right direction, but there's too much in the wrong direction on this. I'm sorry to say, recognising all the good work done. So I think I've made the points I wish. Thank you.
I'll second the
Chair, point of clarification for Councillor Mansell. Is Councillor Mansell suggesting that this committee that listens to individual members, or is he suggesting that individual members make their own response to the Boundary Commission?
I think what Dave is saying is that we do not submit the council's submission as proposed by the working group, but we strongly encourage members of this council to write into the LGBC with their own suggestions, so they get a local flavour of what we want, and also to actually propose and support the bits in the original report which they think were right. Theo, as the proposer of the motion, are you happy with that? Okay, good. We'll compass that when we come to the vote. Dawn,
Forgive me, Chair, I'm going to have to get some clarification again. You just said, based on the information in this report, what you're saying, the Boundary members can't comment on this report because we're not talking about submitting it. That's the point I'm making, whether they support elements or not.
Can you just allow the last two speakers to speak, and then I will try to draw this together. We'll have, I think the last two speakers will be the last two speakers we've got on the list, and then I will read out what my interpretation is, and I'm happy to be corrected, so we know what we're voting on before we put Theo and Dave's motion, okay?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I have listened to the debate, and I'm not in any way underestimating the amount of work that some people have put into this. I would love to have contributed to the work myself, but I wasn't given that opportunity. I reject the idea that if I do not support this, I am not operating as a Somerset councillor. I am thinking about the whole of Somerset. I am also representing the division that I was elected to represent, and I cannot support something which does not work for my division. Absolutely not. Why would I? They are the people that elected me to represent them. That is the voice that I am bringing to this committee. I am standing as the whole of Somerset councillor, as the whole, representing the whole of Somerset, by saying there are far too many areas that are not being served well by this draft proposal. That to me, it means that it is actually not going to be successful across the whole of Somerset. I actually believe that the commissioner looking at Taunton could potentially come up with a better suggestion than this proposal has, because there are so many polling districts which fitted so neatly into the 4,900 requirements of numbers and the community. I'm sorry, Taunton, for me, does not been served well in this proposal in any way, shape or form. And so I will continue to not be able to support this, because I'm representing the people that have elected me, and I will not support something that actually is not going to deliver well for the people of Somerset.
Just at the end, Mandy Chilcott, I'll give a, you can say what you want, and then Mike Ruby very, very quickly, but because he hasn't spoken before. Yes, yeah, but have to be very quick, because you, for the people who come back 2 or 3 times, but I'll allow Mandy longer because she hasn't spoken, and that will be it. Yeah.
Is it myself or Mike now? Sorry, Chair.
Hugh Davis first, then I'll come to you, Mandy, okay?
Thank you.
Chair, I'm happy that Mandy goes before me. Thank you.
You're on.
Thank you very much. I've listened with interest to the debate today and thank the officers for their work. It's a huge mammoth task. I think the challenge here today is those that are comfortable or accepting of what's been suggested for their areas. We probably have not heard their voices today. For me, though, it was actually a point of order. I've heard a proposal coming forward to put a different proposal. My understanding was that you couldn't put a recommendation forward that was contrary or opposing the recommendations, and my view was that it should be voted for, and if it fails or falls, then that's what happens moving forward. So if I could just ask some clarification. I've been trying desperately to follow the conversation, so point of order, please, if I could have that clarified.
Be clarified, Scott. Do we need to vote on the original recommendation to see if that finds support or not? And if it does, it goes forward. If it doesn't, and then we will fall back to the recommendation made by Theo and Dave.
Effectively, yes.
Yes, it's fine. Thank you. Getting very confusing, the number of people is. So this will be the last speakers, and very, very quickly. Yeah, Hugh, Mike and Martin. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The reason why I gave way because that councillor is very prominent in the Minehead area and downwards, and she's got a lot more knowledge of things than I have because she served on the cabinet, etc., etc. Please, Chair, what has horrified me by the whole of this setup of what we have put in front of us is it's saying that Watchet and Willerton will have a reduced amount of people in 2030. I mean, say this completely incorrect, these figures that are here, and it actually calls Willerton a town. We're not a town. I mean, that's just being finicky about the subject, but this has been, well, not right from what it's been put in front of us. And I personally would not support it because this accommodation of people coming into our towns and parishes is completely wrong. It's going all the time. This new government is pushing to get loads of planning through, and we're going to get what we don't want, whether we like it or not. And that hasn't been taken into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I've listened carefully to the debate and I get the distinct impression that members would like to submit something to the LGBCE. It's just not this. On the basis that there are 842 days before the next election, is there not the prospect of asking the LGBCE for another couple of months to try and finesse this into something that we can support?
Again, I think the LGBC would probably state that, as they have throughout, there are opportunities for the council to respond both in terms of this first part of phase 2 and the second part of phase 2. So I think they would highlight that they've given an opportunity. I think the key bit, I think you're touching on in part, I think there's a point of reflection, which is that the council took an affirmative decision to respond to phase 1. And generally when councils do that, they generally continue to respond at each given point in order to ensure that their views are expressed. So I think that's a reflection point.
Yes, thank you. Very briefly, just to point out that the ambitions of the Commission is for single member wards. And I think we should look very carefully at the work we've done to produce the 2-member wards, which we have, which were talked about by the group at great length. And if we vote against this and just leave it to the Commission to come up, you can say goodbye to your 2-member wards. And it will make matters even worse than the submission we are making. So think very carefully before you decide on this vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, after a long and thorough debate, and I'm now going to move to the recommendation printed in the agenda. But Scott, do you want to come back?
Apologies, Chair. I was going to add, hopefully just to help in terms of your sum up, again, just for all members of the committee, just a reflection in terms of, to be clear that both the officers' recommendation following the council's decision to make a submission as part of phase 1, and also the working group's recommendation is that this council should make a response as part of phase 2 by that deadline of 20. Just to highlight that also includes an officer recommendation.
So we're going to move to the vote and on the report. The recommendation is on the paper: consider and finalise the report with the recommendations of the Electoral Review Working Group for submission as the Council's phase 2 response to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. Do I have a proposal to accept that report? It's Councillor Stephen Pugsley. Do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Martin Wale. All those in favour of submitting the report to the working group as the Council's formal submission to the LGBCE? That's 4. And against? I'm against yet. That is lost. So then we move back then as an alternative. So the recommendation is lost. We have a another recommendation. Theo.
In light of what's just happened and what's been said by Councillor Rigby, can I reformulate the proposal and see that if Councillor Mansell is happy with it, it'll be basically the same thing, but can I just articulate what I think we should therefore need to be saying? Somerset Council will agree to continue to engage in the next stages of this process, to encourage all members of the council to submit their own representations to the LGBCE, and to write to the LGBCE asking that more time be allowed. I mean, you know, the answer may be no, but we might as well take Councillor Rigby's suggestion on board, right? Because I believe that more time would have made a huge difference, asking that more time be allowed. Those three things.
By the LGBC, then we'd have an opportunity for the working group to reconvene. Or give delegates.
What a horrifying idea, but yes, I think.
I used to think I was incredibly passionate about stats, about electoral statistics, and it's been a real sad passion in my life. My enthusiasm and passion has waned a little in recent weeks. Anyway, so are you happy to second that, Dave? All those in favour of the proposal put forward by Councillor Butt-Philip? Just read it out again.
Yes, I suggest it's written down. That Somerset Council will continue to take part in the consultation at the further stages of the consultation. Encourages all members of the council to put their own submissions, their own representations to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, and will write to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England requesting that the time for consultation be extended.
The Mansell.
Chair, just a point. I apologise as a point of, but we need to be clear on this. One would suggest that that letter needs to explain some of the reasons why we have frustration, not just saying, can we have a bit of longer time, please, because we're not happy. We need to be clear on why we're not happy.
I'm not sure we need to go through the wording of that now, but I think if that's something that Scott can take on board.
To work on very accurately to encapsulate. Yeah, well, can we delegate that to Scott and Stephen? Thank you. All those in favour of that proposal? And against? Any abstentions? That proposal is carried. Formally under meeting. And thank you very much, members. That's the formal close of the meeting. A very interesting meeting, and thank you for your patience and humour, and it's always going to be quite a challenging one as well. So thank you very much.